Chapter 1. The Mysterious Disappearance. It was a crisp autumn morning when Hercule Poirot, famed Belgian detective, received a peculiar visitor. The early light filtered through the curtains of his modest London apartment, casting long shadows across the polished floor. His small, neatly arranged sitting room, with its orderly bookshelves and immaculate furnishings, was as quiet as ever, save for the faint ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. The only other sound was the soft rustling of Poirot's moustache as he adjusted his usual seating posture, precise and elegant, while contemplating the intricacies of a recent case. He had barely begun his daily routine when the doorbell rang, its chime slicing through the calm morning. Poirot's sharp eyes twinkled with curiosity. Visitors, though rare at this early hour, were not unusual, yet something about this particular visitor intrigued him from the start. The door opened to reveal a tall, gaunt man dressed in a dark suit, his expression anxious and hurried. The stranger's shoes were polished to perfection, but his dishevelled hair and the slight tremble in his hands indicated an underlying nervousness that Poirot found intriguing. The man's face was unfamiliar, though he appeared to be in his late 40s, with greying hair at the temples and a brow furrowed in distress. "Good morning, monsieur," Poirot greeted, standing and offering a polite bow. "How may I be of assistance to you?" The man stepped forward, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He hesitated, as though uncertain how to begin, and then blurted out, "I need your help, Mr. Poirot. It's urgent, and I cannot trust anyone else." Poirot nodded with an air of calm assurance, motioning for the man to sit. "Please, monsieur, you have nothing to fear here. Take a seat and tell me what troubles you." The man sank into the chair across from Poirot, his long fingers twitching with nervous energy. "My name is Charles Beaumont," he began, "and I come from a family of great wealth, Beaumont & Co., the jewellery company. I am the managing director, and lately I've been involved in a most disturbing situation. It all began 2 weeks ago, with the sudden disappearance of a rare and valuable item, a golden toothpick." Poirot's expression remained unreadable, but his keen mind immediately shifted into investigative mode. The mention of a golden toothpick, though seemingly trivial, piqued his interest. "A golden toothpick, you say? And why would such an item warrant your attention, monsieur?" Beaumont's eyes darted around the room before he leaned in closer. "You see, it wasn't just any toothpick, Mr. Poirot. It was an antique, crafted from solid gold, with intricate engravings on its surface. It belonged to my great-grandfather, and for years it has been passed down through the generations. It's a family heirloom, but more than that, it holds great sentimental value. However, 2 weeks ago it vanished." Poirot raised an eyebrow, his mind processing the details. "A rare and valuable object indeed, but the disappearance of a toothpick seems unusual, even for a man such as myself. What makes this case so extraordinary, monsieur?" Charles Beaumont's gaze grew more intense. "The toothpick didn't simply disappear. It was stolen. But that is not the most perplexing part. The person who stole it is someone we trust, someone inside the family." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the man. "Ah, now we are speaking of something more intriguing. A betrayal within the family, n'est-ce pas? Please, monsieur, continue." Beaumont took a deep breath. his fingers curling into fists on his lap. My cousin, Alexander Beaumont, is the one who took the toothpick. I'm certain of it. But the strange thing is, he denies it. He insists he never took it, and yet he has no alibi for the night it went missing. Worse still, he has become more and more erratic since the disappearance. I fear that he has become unhinged, Mr. Poirot. And now he's threatening to destroy the family name if we expose him. Poirot's mind raced. The situation had all the markings of a complex case, with family drama, theft, and a valuable object at the centre. But there was more to this than met the eye. You say that Alexander Beaumont denies taking the toothpick. But tell me, monsieur, does he have any motive for such an act? Beaumont's expression hardened. Motive? Alexander has always been jealous of my position in the company. He has always felt that he should have been the one to inherit the business, not me. He's bitter and resentful, and I believe that this theft is his way of striking out at me, at the family, and at everything I've worked so hard for. Poirot nodded thoughtfully, then asked, "And where is this Alexander now? Is he still at the family estate?" Beaumont hesitated, his eyes shifting nervously. "Yes, he is, but I cannot approach him directly. He has become volatile, and I fear for my safety, as well as the safety of my family. I need your help, Mr. Poirot. Please find out the truth. If Alexander is innocent, I will gladly apologize. But if he is guilty, I need you to expose him before he does irreparable damage." Poirot stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the busy London street below. The mystery of the golden toothpick was far from straightforward. A family heirloom, a possible theft, and a man with everything to gain from the act. All the elements of a compelling case. But Poirot knew that the truth would not be revealed so easily. "I will take your case, monsieur," Poirot said, turning to face Beaumont with a reassuring smile. "I will begin my investigation immediately. But first, I require all the information you can provide about this golden toothpick and the circumstances surrounding its disappearance." Beaumont nodded eagerly, standing up from his seat. "Anything you need, Mr. Poirot. I will provide it." Poirot motioned to the chair, signalling for Beaumont to remain seated. "And now, monsieur, I must ask you some questions. You say that Alexander has no alibi. What of his whereabouts on the night the toothpick disappeared?" Beaumont's face darkened. "He was at the family estate, alone. He claims to have been in his study, but no one can confirm it. I checked with the servants. They didn't see him leave his study until the morning." Poirot smiled slightly, intrigued by the inconsistencies. "Very well, monsieur. This will be a fascinating case to unravel." As Poirot's mind began to piece together the details of the case, he felt the thrill of a new puzzle forming in front of him. There were gaps in the story, strange elements that didn't quite align, and a family's reputation hanging in the balance. He would uncover the truth about the golden toothpick, and in doing so, he would expose more than just a thief. He would reveal the hidden depths of a family's darkest secrets. Chapter 2. The clues begin to surface. The next morning, Hercule, Poirot found himself on a quiet street in the outskirts of London. It was a short distance from the bustling city centre, and yet the air here seemed to carry an entirely different energy, calm, reserved and cloaked in secrecy. This was the residence of the Beaumont family, an estate that had been in their possession for generations. The sprawling grounds were beautifully maintained, with lush gardens and a stately mansion that stood as a testament to the family's long history of wealth and influence. Poirot's sharp eyes took in every detail as he approached the front. Dompteur. The large iron gates swung open silently at his arrival, as though the estate itself recognized the importance of his visit. A butler greeted him at the door with a polite nod, ushering him inside. "Good morning, Monsieur Poirot. Master Beaumont is expecting you," the butler said, his voice low and respectful. Poirot acknowledged the butler with a small nod of his own. "Thank you, my good man. Lead the way." As they walked through the grand halls of the mansion, Poirot's mind raced with possibilities. The theft of the golden toothpick had all the hallmarks of a classic mystery. The tension within the family, the potential motive for greed, and the strange behavior of Alexander Beaumont, all of it pointed toward an intriguing puzzle. But Poirot was a man who understood the importance of the smallest detail, and he knew that the truth often lay hidden beneath layers of falsehoods and half-truths. They arrived at a large, well-appointed sitting room where Charles Beaumont was waiting for him. His face was pale, and his eyes bore the signs of a sleepless night. He stood as Poirot entered, his hand outstretched in greeting. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot, I am so grateful that you came. Please sit. I have arranged for you to meet with some of the household staff who may be able to provide insight into Alexander's behavior," Beaumont said, his voice tense with anxiety. Poirot took a seat in the chair opposite Beaumont, crossing his legs and adjusting his immaculate suit. "It is my pleasure, Monsieur Beaumont, but before I meet with these individuals, I must first ask you about the night of the disappearance. You mentioned that your cousin Alexander had been in his study. Was anyone else in the house at the time?" Beaumont's brow furrowed as he thought for a moment. "No, there was no one else in the house that night. I had just returned from a business meeting in London, and my wife was away visiting friends. It was a quiet evening, as far as I know." Poirot nodded slowly, his mind absorbing the details. "And you said that the servants did not see Alexander leave his study until the morning. Were any of them aware that the toothpick was missing before you informed them?" Beaumont hesitated, his hands trembling slightly as he clasped them together. "No, I didn't inform anyone until the following day. I searched the house thoroughly, but the toothpick was nowhere to be found. I thought perhaps it had been misplaced, but I soon realized that it must have been stolen." Poirot's piercing eyes narrowed slightly. "Interesting. And you say your cousin Alexander is the only person who had access to the study. Could it be that someone else in the house could have taken it without your knowledge?" Beaumont shook his head. "No, Mr. Poirot, I trust my household staff implicitly. They are loyal and hard-working. I am certain that they would never steal from me." Poirot's expression softened, his gaze shifting to the window where the faint light of dawn was beginning to pierce through the heavy curtains. "I understand, monsieur. But it is important to remember that trust can be misplaced, and loyalty can be compromised under certain circumstances. I would like to speak with the servants nonetheless, just to be thorough." Beaumont nodded quickly, eager to cooperate. "Of course, Mr. Poirot. I understand. I have already arranged for them to meet you." As if on cue, the door opened and a middle-aged woman entered the room. She had a stern expression and walked with a purposeful stride, her grey hair tied neatly in a bun. She was dressed in the traditional uniform of a housekeeper and carried herself with an air of authority. "Ah, Mrs. Larkins, I believe you are familiar with Monsieur Poirot," Beaumont said, standing up to greet her. The housekeeper gave a brief, polite curtsy before speaking. "Yes, sir. I understand Mr. Poirot is here to investigate the missing heirloom." Poirot rose as well, offering a respectful bow. "It is a pleasure, madam. I trust you have been in service to the Beaumont family for many years." Mrs. Larkins nodded, her expression unreadable. "I have, Monsieur Poirot. Over 20 years, in fact. I know the family well." Poirot's sharp mind immediately latched onto the woman's words. 20 years. She had likely witnessed the highs and lows of the Beaumont family, including any number of internal dramas and conflicts. She was a key piece in this puzzle, and he intended to learn all she knew. "I would like to ask you about the night in question, Mrs. Larkins. Were you aware of any unusual activity within the house?" Poirot inquired, his tone measured and precise. The housekeeper's eyes flickered momentarily, but she quickly regained her composure. "No, Monsieur Poirot, nothing unusual at all. The house was quiet. I was in my quarters, as usual. But I did hear some strange sounds coming from the study late at night." Poirot's interest piqued. "Strange sounds? What sort of sounds?" Mrs. Larkins hesitated, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting someone to overhear. "It was hard to describe, sir. Almost as if something had been knocked over, a shuffling sound, but I thought nothing of it. The house is old, and things like that happen from time to time." Poirot leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "And you did not go to investigate? Surely a sound like that would warrant a closer look." The housekeeper's lips pressed into a thin line. "I did not. I have my duties, and I did not wish to intrude." Poirot studied her closely, reading the subtle signs of discomfort in her posture. Something about her words didn't sit right. "Very well, Mrs. Larkins, I appreciate your cooperation. Perhaps we will speak again later." The housekeeper gave a stiff nod and turned to leave the room. As she did, Poirot's sharp eyes followed her movements, noting the way she quickly exited as if eager to put an end to the conversation. Once she was gone, Poirot turned back to Beaumont. "Monsieur, I believe we have our first clue. Mrs. Larkins's reaction to the sounds in the study is most curious. I will need to speak with the rest of the staff to corroborate her story, but I sense that this case is more complex than it appears." Beaumont nodded, his face pale. "I fear you are right, Mr. Poirot. There is more at play here than I understand." Poirot stood, adjusting his suit with his usual care. "Do not worry, monsieur. We will uncover the truth, no matter how deeply it is buried. I will leave no stone unturned." With that, Poirot set about the task of unravelling the mystery of the golden toothpick, a case that promised to reveal far more than just the identity of a thief. As he prepared to meet the rest of the household staff, he knew that each person he spoke to would reveal a piece of the puzzle, and in the end, the truth would be laid bare. Chapter 3. The Hidden Truth. Revealed Poirot's day began early the next morning, his mind already set on uncovering the mystery of the golden toothpick. The night had been restless, his thoughts swirling with possibilities. Each clue, Each statement from the people involved seemed to lead to more questions than answers. But that was the way of a puzzle. Each layer peeled away revealed another layer beneath it. Poirot had no intention of leaving any part of this case untouched. After a quick breakfast in his modest London apartment, Poirot made his way back to the Beaumont estate. The day was cool, with a hint of rain in the air, but Poirot was undeterred. His polished shoes clicked crisply against the cobblestone as he made his way to the front door, which was once again opened by the same butler, who seemed almost too eager to see him return. "Good morning, Monsieur Poirot," the butler said, his expression carefully neutral. "Master Beaumont is expecting you." Poirot nodded and stepped inside, scanning the hallway briefly before following the butler to the study. He had already concluded that this was the place where all the answers lay. If he could only uncover the truth of what happened during that fateful night, he could solve this mystery. But everything in the study was silent, still, as though it was hiding its secrets well. Beaumont stood by the large oak desk, nervously tapping his fingers on the surface. When Poirot entered, he quickly gestured for him to sit. "I've arranged for you to meet the rest of the household staff, as you requested," he said, his voice strained. "Excellent," Poirot replied, his eyes scanning the room with sharp precision. He had already observed the slight tremor in Beaumont's hands, the tightening of his jaw. It was clear that the man was deeply troubled, but Poirot had learned not to take emotions at face value. Every movement, every gesture carried meaning. Poirot settled into the chair across from Beaumont, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "Monsieur Beaumont, I have been reflecting on your cousin Alexander. His behaviour, his sudden decision to travel abroad, and the missing toothpick, all of these things trouble me. There is more to this story than meets the eye." Beaumont's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time he seemed to lose his composure. "What do you mean, Mr. Poirot?" Poirot's gaze hardened. "I believe Alexander Beaumont is not being entirely truthful with us. He has something to hide, and I believe this has something to do with the missing golden toothpick. Perhaps he did not steal it, but I suspect he knows far more about its disappearance than he has let on." Beaumont's face paled, his fingers gripping the edge of the desk. "You think Alexander—" "I do not know yet, monsieur, but I intend to find out," Poirot interjected smoothly. "I will speak with the staff now and examine the rest of the house. I am certain that we will uncover the truth in due time." Beaumont nodded, though his anxiety was palpable. "I trust you, Mr. Poirot. Do what you must, but if you find anything troubling, please let me know." Poirot gave a slight, reassuring smile. "Indeed, Monsieur Beaumont. Now, I shall begin with the others." The first person Poirot spoke to was the gardener, a stout man named Mr. Higgins, who had worked on the estate for over 15 years. His hands were thick with calluses, and he wore a weathered but not unkind expression. Poirot sat across. From him in the garden, the distant sound of birds chirping faint in the background. "You were working in the gardens the night the toothpick went missing, Mr. Higgins?" Poirot asked, his voice calm and measured. The gardener nodded slowly, wiping his hands on his trousers before responding. I was. It was a quiet night, Mr. Poirot. Nothing unusual. I did my usual rounds, watered the plants, tended to the flowers. Nothing to get excited about." Poirot watched him closely, sensing that there was more to his statement than met the eye. And you did not hear anything strange, no footsteps, no noises coming from the house?" Higgins shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting to the ground. "No, I didn't, but now that you mention it, I did see something odd in the garden late that night." Poirot's ears pricked up at the mention of something unusual. "What did you see, Mr. Higgins?" Higgins hesitated, as though considering whether to speak further. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I saw a shadow moving near the window of the study. I couldn't make out who it was. Too far away, you see. But it was definitely someone inside the house. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now that you mention the toothpick—" Poirot nodded slowly, piecing the information together. In his mind, a shadow near the study window. Did you hear any sounds, any voices? "No, no voices, Monsieur Poirot. Just the figure moving behind the curtains," Higgins said, his voice uncertain. But that was all. Poirot gave him a reassuring smile. "Thank you, Mr. Higgins. This is most helpful. You may go now, but please remain available should I have further questions." The gardener left, and Poirot sat for a moment, deep in thought. A shadow moving near the study window. Was it Alexander, or someone else entirely? The gardener's testimony only added to the mystery, but it also raised more questions. Poirot was now more convinced than ever that someone in the house knew more than they were letting on. Next, Poirot interviewed the housemaid, Miss Emily Harris, a young woman who had been in the service of the Beaumont family for only a few months. She was nervous, her hands twisting in her lap as she sat. Across from him, "Miss Harris, I understand you were working in the kitchen the evening the toothpick was taken," Poirot said gently. "Yes, Mr. Poirot," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I was in the kitchen all night, preparing dinner for Master Beaumont, but I did hear something strange." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes focused intently on her. "What did you hear, Miss Harris?" The young woman paused for a moment, her eyes darting nervously to the door. "I heard someone whispering just outside the kitchen window. It was faint, but I'm sure I heard it. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like someone was trying to be quiet, sneaking around." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Did you recognize the voice?" Miss Harris shook her head. "No, Mr. Poirot, I couldn't say for sure." Poirot sat back in his chair, his mind turning over the new information. A shadow in the garden, a whispering voice outside the kitchen window. These were small details, yet they held the promise of greater revelations. The pieces were slowly falling into place, but Poirot knew that there was still much to uncover. "I thank you for your honesty, Miss Harris. You may return to your duties," Poirot said. As Miss Harris left the room, Poirot glanced at Beaumont, who had been quietly observing the conversation from the doorway. "There is much more to this story, monsieur. The staff are all hiding something, but they are not yet ready to reveal the full truth. We must dig deeper, continue to press them." Beaumont nodded, his face tense. "I trust you, Mr. Poirot. Whatever it takes to solve this mystery." Poirot's lips curled into a small, determined smile. "We are getting closer, monsieur. We are getting closer." And with that, the investigation into the golden toothpick continued, with Poirot's mind sharp and his resolve even sharper. The truth was out there, hidden just beneath the surface, and it was only a matter of time before he would unearth it. Chapter 4. A Shocking Revelation. The following day, the investigation into the mystery of the golden toothpick took a more unexpected turn. Poirot, ever meticulous in his approach, had continued his interviews with the household staff. But one particular conversation with the housekeeper, Mrs. Clare, was about to change everything. She was a woman of indeterminate age, with sharp eyes that never missed a detail, and her role in the household was crucial. She had been there for over 10 years, longer than any of the other servants, and her loyalty to the Beaumont family was unquestionable. Poirot had been intrigued by her quiet demeanour, and felt that beneath her stern exterior lay a well of untapped knowledge. She had been watching the household for years, seeing the subtle changes, the secrets that people tried to keep hidden. He had arranged to meet her in the afternoon in the privacy of the drawing-room, a space seldom used except for special occasions. The light from the window bathed the room in a soft golden hue, and Poirot could already sense that this conversation would yield the breakthrough he had been waiting for. Mrs. Clare entered, her steps measured, and her eyes settled on Poirot with a gaze that seemed to weigh him carefully. She was a woman who rarely revealed much, but Poirot had a way of coaxing information from people, peeling back their layers like the petals of a flower. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Clare," Poirot began, standing to greet her, offering her a chair. "Please sit down. I have some questions that I believe only you can answer." She nodded silently, taking the seat with the grace of someone who had long been accustomed to authority. Poirot sat across from her, his hands neatly folded, his posture erect. "I understand that you've been in service at Beaumont House for many years," Poirot said, his voice calm but probing. "And I also understand that you have seen many things here, perhaps things that others might not have noticed." Mrs. Clare gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. Poirot smiled inwardly. He had piqued her curiosity, as he had hoped. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot," she replied softly, her voice steady. "I have been in the employ of Master Beaumont's family for over a decade. I know this house well as the people who live in it." "And what of the night the golden toothpick went missing?" Poirot asked, leaning forward slightly. "I understand you were in the house at the time. Did you notice anything unusual? Any odd sounds, or perhaps something out of place?" Mrs. Clare's eyes flickered for just a moment, but the motion was too quick for Poirot to discern its meaning. She held his gaze for a moment longer before replying, her voice low. "I did hear something strange, Mr. Poirot," she said slowly, her tone measured, as though weighing the consequences of her words. "But I did not want to make too much of it. It might seem trivial." Poirot leaned in, his interest piqued. "Tell me, Mrs. Clare, what did you hear?" She hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of her napkin on the table. It was late that evening, not long before the toothpick was discovered missing. "I was passing through the hallway near the study when I heard footsteps coming from within. I thought nothing of it at first, as the family often works late into the night. But then I heard voices, whispers, loud enough that they carried into the hallway." Poirot raised an eyebrow, his attention now fully focused. "Voices? Did you recognize who they belonged to?" Mrs. Clare hesitated again, her eyes shifting toward the window, as though the answer lay beyond the glass. "I could not say for sure, but I distinctly heard Master Beaumont's voice, and I believe I also heard Alexander's." Poirot's mind raced. Alexander had left for his trip abroad just a few days before the incident, had he not? Or so it had been told. But if Alexander had been here, in the house, at the time of the theft, that would make everything more complicated. Perhaps his supposed departure had been a ruse, an alibi to cover his tracks. "Did you hear what they were speaking about?" Poirot asked, trying to keep his voice casual, though the undercurrent of urgency in his tone was unmistakable. Mrs. Clare frowned slightly, as though trying to recall the exact words. No, but there was an unmistakable tension in their voices. It was not a friendly conversation, and I could hear the scraping of something metal. It wasn't until later that I learned about the toothpick, and I thought the two things might be connected. Poirot sat back in his chair, his mind churning. Mrs. Clare had just provided a crucial piece of information. If Alexander had been present in the house, it would explain the strange behaviour surrounding the golden toothpick's disappearance. But why had he been there, and what had he been discussing with Beaumont? "Thank you, Mrs. Clare," Poirot said, his tone grateful but thoughtful. "This information is most valuable. You've given me a great deal to consider." She gave him a small nod, her eyes still wary. "And I have told you what I know, Mr. Poirot. If there is anything else, I will answer to the best of my ability." Poirot stood and gave a slight bow, his mind already moving to the next step of his investigation. "I believe you have been most helpful, Mrs. Clare. For now, I have no further questions. But please, if you recall anything else, do not hesitate to come forward." Mrs. Clare left the room with the same quiet dignity that she had entered with, and Poirot was left alone with his thoughts. The discovery that Alexander had been in the house the night of the disappearance brought a new layer of complexity to the case, but there was still so much to uncover. Alexander's presence, the whispers, the metal scraping noise. What did it all mean? Poirot's mind was already formulating a plan of action. He would need to speak with Beaumont once more. The conversation between the two men could reveal the motive behind the theft. And perhaps, Poirot mused, it would expose a deeper, more personal conflict between the cousins. Perhaps it was not just about the golden toothpick at all. Perhaps there was something more at play, something hidden beneath the surface, something that neither Beaumont nor Alexander had been willing to admit. The answers were within reach. Poirot could feel it. Later that afternoon, Poirot found himself back in the study, this time face to face with Beaumont once again. The tension in the room was palpable as Poirot pressed the issue. "Monsieur Beaumont," he began, his voice soft but firm, "there is something that I must ask you, something that I believe could change the course of this investigation." Beaumont looked up sharply, his face unreadable. "What is it, Mr. Poirot?" Poirot's eyes locked onto Beaumont's. "I must know the truth about Alexander's whereabouts the night the golden toothpick disappeared. Mrs. Clare, the housekeeper, tells me she overheard voices, your voice and Alexander's, and I have reason to believe that he was in the house at the time of the theft." Beaumont's expression faltered for just a moment. Poirot noticed it instantly, the briefest flicker of something like guilt or fear. I don't know what to say," Beaumont stammered. "But if Mrs. Clare heard something, then I cannot deny it. Alexander did return to the house that night, but he insisted that he was only here to collect something. Something personal. Poirot's gaze hardened. Something personal? Yes, something he had left behind, Beaumont replied, his voice strained. But I swear to you, Mr. Poirot, I had nothing to do with the theft. You must believe me. Poirot studied him closely. There was something in Beaumont's words that didn't quite add up. Something he was still hiding. Poirot's mind clicked into place. It was clear now that this puzzle was far more intricate than he had initially suspected. Chapter 5. The Unravelling Web. The next morning, Poirot took his usual brisk walk around the grounds of Beaumont House, the crisp air sharpening his senses. His mind was alight with the latest developments. Alexander's secretive return to the house, his tense conversation with Beaumont, and the cryptic mention of something personal that Alexander had been collecting. It was clear to Poirot that the situation was more complex than a simple theft of a valuable trinket. The golden toothpick was merely the surface, a symptom of something deeper, something far more treacherous. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by the soft crunch of gravel underfoot as he made his way back toward the house. As he approached the front door, he was met by the butler, Charles, who had a rather grim expression on his face. He looked around cautiously, as if hesitant to speak in the open. "Monsieur Poirot," Charles said, his voice low, "there is something you must see. It is about the golden toothpick." Poirot raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Indeed? Lead the way, Charles. I am most eager to see what new development has come to light." The butler led Poirot to the study, where the scene of the crime had been the night before. It was there that Charles stopped, and with a furtive glance over his shoulder whispered, "It is the drawer, Monsieur Poirot, the one where the toothpick was kept. It has been tampered with." Poirot stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. The desk, a grand mahogany piece, was precisely as he remembered it. Neat, organized and untouched, except for a single drawer at the far right. It was open just a fraction, its contents slightly disordered. The delicate and meticulously arranged papers, once neatly stacked, now lay in a scattered heap. A small silver handle on a nearby drawer was askew, as if someone had carelessly tried to open it without permission. Poirot leaned forward, his fingers brushing the edge of the drawer. He could feel the remnants of something disturbingly wrong. His mind worked quickly, piecing together the clues. The golden toothpick had been stolen, yet the drawer had not been broken into in the usual sense of violence or destruction. Instead, it had been subtly manipulated, suggesting someone with careful intent, someone who knew the house and its contents very well. "Charles," Poirot said, his voice now focused, "who else has access to this study besides Monsieur Beaumont and his cousin?" Charles shifted uncomfortably, but then answered, "Only the family, sir. And Mrs. Clare, of course. She has a key to the study in case the family needs anything in particular. But she swears she has not touched anything." Poirot straightened up, his mind turning over the possibilities. Mrs. Clare's involvement could not yet be ruled out, but her loyalty seemed deeply embedded. No, Poirot thought, it was not her. His suspicions, however, had already begun to point in a different direction, towards Alexander. It was becoming more clear that Alexander's return to the house had not been as innocent as it had first appeared. And now, with the discovery of the tampered drawer, The web of deception seemed to grow tighter. "What of the other servants?" Poirot asked. "Anyone else who might have access?" "Only the maids and the footmen, sir," Charles replied, but Poirot could sense that he was withholding something. The butler hesitated, his face betraying a flicker of discomfort. "Charles," Poirot pressed gently, "is there something more you wish to tell me? Do not fear, you may speak freely." Charles hesitated for a moment longer before sighing deeply. "There is one more thing, Monsieur Poirot. The night of the theft. I overheard something. I did not think much of it at the time, but now I wonder if it is related. I was in the kitchen preparing for the evening meal, and I heard voices coming from the back stairs. It was a heated exchange. The voices, one of them, was unmistakably Alexander's. But the other voice, it was lower, more menacing." Poirot's ears pricked at the mention of a second voice. "Did you hear what they were saying?" Charles's brow furrowed. "No, not exactly, but there was a strange tone to their words. It was as though they were arguing about something important, and then I heard the sound of something heavy being moved. It could have been a piece of furniture, but it was a strange noise for that hour." Poirot's thoughts raced as he pieced together this new information. The heated argument, the sound of something heavy being moved, these were no mere coincidences. Someone, perhaps Alexander, had been involved in something far more dangerous than the simple theft of a golden toothpick. Could there be a secret within the family, something worth fighting for? "Charles," Poirot said, his voice even, "was there any sign of this struggle afterward? Any marks, scratches, or damage to the area around the back stairs?" Charles shook his head. "None that I could see, Monsieur Poirot. But I did find a small, unusual item later that evening, just outside the kitchen. It was a scrap of cloth, dark in colour, almost like velvet." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A scrap of cloth, you say? Can you bring it to me, Charles?" The butler nodded and swiftly left the room, returning a moment later with a small piece of dark fabric, which he carefully handed to Poirot. Upon closer inspection, Poirot could see that the fabric was indeed velvet, a deep, rich purple, but it had been torn in a jagged manner, suggesting it had been ripped hastily. Poirot could already surmise that the cloth was important. It was a clue, but a clue to what? To whom did it belong? "Tell me," Poirot continued, studying the fabric, "do you recognize this cloth? Have you ever seen it before?" Charles hesitated, his fingers twitching nervously. "No, Monsieur Poirot, I do not recognize it. I thought it odd too, but I did not think much of it until now." Poirot's thoughts were racing. This was no ordinary piece of fabric. It was rich, expensive, and seemed out of place in a house like this. So out of place, in fact, that it made Poirot consider the possibility of a hidden connection between the fabric and the disappearance of the golden toothpick. Perhaps it was linked to the argument he had heard. "Thank you, Charles," Poirot said, his voice steady but thoughtful. "This will prove useful." With the fabric in hand, Poirot excused Charles and retreated to his small, private study within the house. He spread the fabric out before him, his eyes tracing its edges. Everything about it suggested that it was a part of something larger, perhaps a garment or a tapestry, but Poirot knew that it was not something easily dismissed. It had a significance that he had yet to uncover, and it would lead him closer to the truth. As Poirot examined the scrap more carefully, he began to formulate a plan. It was clear now that the golden toothpick was the focal point of something far greater, a conflict between the Beaumont family and perhaps a hidden adversary. And Alexander, for all his charming bravado, seemed to be at the centre of it all. Poirot stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the sprawling estate. The answers were close now. He could feel them just beyond his reach. The tangled web of secrets, lies, and deception was beginning to unravel, and Poirot was ready to follow it wherever it would lead. Chapter 6. The Clue of the Velvet Scrap. Discovery of the velvet scrap had unsettled Hercule Poirot in a way that was subtle yet profound. He had encountered many clues in his career, each leading him toward the truth. But this piece of fabric felt different. It was as if it had been deliberately left behind, a trail not to be ignored. His mind worked in overdrive as he pondered the significance of the fragment, his fingers lightly brushing over the rich, dark velvet. The fabric had the texture of something both expensive and distinctive. It was not just any ordinary material. It suggested wealth, perhaps a rich garment or the upholstery of a luxurious item. The thought that it could be part of someone's clothing, a piece of an elaborate costume, or perhaps a highly personal item, was intriguing. But who in Beaumont House would be associated with such a fine fabric? More importantly, why was it found outside the kitchen, so far from the rooms where the household members typically congregated? Poirot rose from his desk, his small figure casting a long shadow in the low light of his study. He paced across the room slowly, his mind darting between the various possibilities. The golden toothpick was still missing, and yet the case had become more complicated with every passing hour. Each discovery seemed to lead only to more questions, and Poirot knew he had to find the answers quickly before they slipped beyond his grasp. Suddenly, there was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," Poirot called, turning toward the sound. The door creaked open, and Charles, the butler, stepped inside with a tray of tea. He placed it down carefully on the table, but there was something in Chichon, his demeanour, that caught Poirot's attention immediately. The butler's eyes were darting nervously, and his hands trembled ever so slightly as he poured the tea. "Monsieur Poirot," Charles began, his voice low, "I thought you should know. There have been strange occurrences in the house since the discovery of the toothpick. The atmosphere is tense, and there is talk among the servants about things being out of place." Poirot gave Charles a reassuring smile, but his mind was already working. "Out of place?" he repeated, his interest piqued. "What things exactly?" "I do. I cannot explain why, but I feel it in my bones. The toothpick was a part of him, and now that it has resurfaced, I fear that something darker is at play." Poirot stood up slowly, his thoughts swirling as he processed the information. And what of the disturbances in the house? The strange noises, the shadowy figures. Do you believe they are connected to your lover's disappearance as well? Mrs. Clare's eyes widened, her hand trembling slightly as she clutched the edge of her chair. I do not know, Monsieur Poirot, but I fear that whoever took the toothpick is trying to unravel the secrets I have worked so hard to bury." Poirot placed his hands behind his back, pacing slowly as he considered the situation. The mystery was deepening. But he now had a crucial piece of the puzzle. Mrs. Clare had a past that was intertwined with the events of the present, and the golden toothpick was at the centre of it all. But the question remained, who else knew about the toothpick, and who stood to gain from its disappearance? "Madame Clare," Poirot said at last, his voice quiet but resolute, "I believe we are only scratching the surface of a much larger mystery. The truth of your lover's disappearance, the golden toothpick, and the strange happenings in this house are all connected. But to uncover the truth, we must dig deeper." Mrs. Clare looked up at him, her face pale but determined. "Do what you must, Monsieur Poirot, but be careful. The past has a way of haunting us all." Poirot nodded, his mind already shifting to the next step. There was no time to waste. The golden toothpick, the velvet fabric, the shadows in the house, they were all pieces of a much larger puzzle, and he would not rest until it was solved. Chapter 8. The Shadow of the Past. The evening was deepening as Hercule Poirot stood in front of the grand mirror in the entrance hall of Beaumont House, his reflection sharp and unyielding. His mind churned with the new information he had gathered from Mrs. Clare. The housekeeper's revelation about the golden toothpick was significant, but it opened more questions than it answered. What was the connection between the mysterious disappearance of her lover all those years ago, the toothpick, and the strange occurrences within the house? Poirot's gaze narrowed as he observed his own reflection. He would need to tread carefully from this point forward. The intricacies of this case were layered with secrets, and each revelation seemed to lead to another door, yet to be opened. He turned away from the mirror and walked towards the door to the study, where he had left Inspector Lestrade, who was reviewing some of the evidence they had gathered. The inspector had proven useful, but Poirot knew that the man's straightforward methods were sometimes limited by his own biases. He, Poirot, would need to navigate the complexities of this case with more finesse. Upon entering the study, Poirot found Lestrade hunched over a stack of papers, his brow furrowed as he scribbled something in a notebook. At the sound of Poirot's entrance, the inspector looked up with a grim expression. "Any progress, Poirot?" Lestrade asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "I've gone through all of the witnesses' statements, but nothing adds up. It's like the whole family is hiding something." Poirot paused in the doorway, considering his next words carefully. "Ah, but you see, mon ami, when a family hides something, it is often not a matter of what is concealed, but why it is concealed. I do not believe it is a matter of guilt, but of something far deeper, more personal." Lestrade sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I don't understand. You think the toothpick has something to do with it, don't you?" Poirot nodded slowly, his expression serious. "I do, and I also believe Mrs. Clare knows more than she is letting on. There are connections here, hidden ones that we have yet to uncover." "Hidden connections?" Lestrade repeated sceptically. "Poirot, this case is beginning to feel like a bad dream. The toothpick, the strange noises, the shadows, it's all too improbable." Poirot allowed a small smile to tug at his lips. "Ah, but as you know, mon ami, in my world there are no impossibilities, only undiscovered truths. Let us return to the scene of the crime, the house itself." Lestrade followed Poirot's lead, standing up and grabbing his coat from the back of the chair. "The house? What do you mean?" "The house," Poirot repeated, turning back towards the hallway, "has a story to tell. We have focused too much on the people, on the motives and the secrets they wish to keep hidden. But sometimes the walls themselves have their own history to reveal." Lestrade hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "All right, lead the way." The two men made their way through the winding corridors of Beaumont House, Poirot's keen eyes scanning every detail of the surroundings. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the walls, adding to the air of mystery that clung to the mansion like a shroud. They passed several rooms, but Poirot's steps faltered as they approached the library. It was here that the first strange occurrence had been reported. Loud noises coming from the direction of the locked bookshelf. The peculiar feeling of being watched. Poirot had visited the library earlier, but now, standing in front of the grand double doors, he felt the familiar prickling sensation on the back of his neck. Something was not quite right. Poirot turned to Lestrade. "We shall begin. Here, Inspector. The library. It holds a clue. A subtle one, but important all the same." Lestrade raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, Poirot?" Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he pushed open the heavy wooden doors, the hinges creaking in protest. The library was vast, its walls lined with towering bookshelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. A grand fireplace stood at the far end, and a large desk was positioned near the windows, which were now obscured by thick, dark curtains. Everything seemed still, but Poirot's eyes were sharp, scanning the room for anything out of place. Poirot stepped forward, his gaze moving from one shelf to the next. "There is something about this room," he murmured, almost to himself. "Something not quite right." Lestrade followed him, looking around, but saw nothing unusual. "What are you getting at, Poirot? This is just a library. It's dusty and old, but I don't see what's so strange about it." Poirot's sharp eyes fell on a section of bookshelves near the far corner. "That," he said, pointing, "is where we begin." Lestrade stared at the bookshelves in confusion. "The books? There's nothing different about them." Poirot stepped closer to the bookshelves, running his fingers along the edges. "Ah, but there is, Inspector. There is always something about the smallest detail that betrays the larger truth." With a subtle motion, Poirot removed a book from the shelf and handed it to Lestrade. The title was The Art of Ancient Mysticism, a tome on esoteric rituals and lost civilizations. Nothing particularly noteworthy about it, Lestrade thought. But Poirot wasn't looking at the book itself. He was focused on the shelf behind it. "Do you see?" Poirot asked. Lestrade leaned in, studying the shelf with a frown. At first he saw nothing, but then his eyes widened. The bookshelf was not solid. It was a false panel, cleverly hidden. He pressed against the edge, and it swung open with a soft click, revealing a narrow, dark passageway leading deeper into the house. "Good heavens!" Lestrade breathed. "A secret passage, indeed," Poirot said quietly, a slight smile on his lips. "A passage that was not meant to be discovered, I suspect. Let us see where it leads." They ventured into the passage, Poirot's mind racing as he considered the possibilities. This was no mere coincidence. The hidden passage was likely a relic from an earlier time, perhaps even from the era when Mrs. Clare's lover had disappeared. Could it be that this was where he had hidden? Or perhaps where something or someone else had been concealed? The passage led them to a small, dimly lit room at the end of the corridor. In the centre of the room was an old wooden chest, its surface coated in a layer of dust. Poirot approached it slowly, his eyes scanning every detail. There was no indication of what might be inside, but his instincts told him that this was another key piece of the puzzle. Lestrade, ever the sceptic, crossed his arms. "What do you think is in there, Poirot?" Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he knelt in front of the chest and carefully inspected the lock. "We shall see soon enough, Inspector. But first, I believe we must examine this with great care. This chest holds the answers to many of the questions we have yet to ask." As Poirot reached for the lock, his fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. His eyes widened, and he froze for a moment. Something inside the chest was alive. The sensation was unmistakable. Lestrade stepped back, his curiosity piqued. "What is it, Poirot?" Poirot's gaze never left the chest. "I believe, Inspector, that we are about to uncover a truth much darker than we ever imagined." Hals hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "There are rumours, sir, whispers in the corridors. Some of the maids have claimed to have heard noises at night, footsteps where there should be no one, doors creaking open by themselves, and one of the footmen swears he saw a shadow moving across the hallway late last night near the study." Poirot's sharp eyes narrowed as he digested the information. Strange occurrences, mysterious noises. This was more than mere superstition. There was something deeply amiss in Beaumont House, and these disturbances were not to be brushed aside. They were connected to the theft of the golden toothpick. Of that Poirot was certain. "Tell me, Charles," Poirot said, his voice calm but commanding. "Have any of these occurrences been linked to a specific time or place? Are there any patterns emerging?" Charles paused, running a hand through his hair as he considered the question. "The noises, well, they seem to happen most often around the library and study. It's as though something or someone is trying to move around the house without being seen. But I cannot make sense of it, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot remained silent for a moment, his mind racing. This new information was invaluable. The library and study, both areas of importance in the house, were now at the centre of these disturbances. Could the stolen golden toothpick be more than just a trinket? Was there something hidden, something far more valuable or dangerous that had yet to be uncovered? "Charles," Poirot said, breaking his train of thought, "do you know of anyone who might have a key to both the library and the study?" Charles looked taken aback, clearly caught off guard by the question. "Only the family, sir. Mr. Beaumont, his cousin Alexander, and of course Mrs. Clare have keys to those rooms. But all the doors are locked unless someone has reason to enter them." Poirot's mind immediately focused on the name that had popped up in the conversation: Mrs. Clare. The housekeeper had been a fixture of Beaumont House for years, but could she have something to do with the recent events? There was more to her than met the eye. Poirot had always trusted his instincts when it came to people, and right now his instincts were pointing toward Mrs. Clare. He stood up, placing the velvet scrap carefully on the table and turned toward the door. "Charles," he said, his voice firm, "I would like to speak with Mrs. Clare. Immediately." Mrs. Clare was in her office when Poirot arrived. The small but well-kept room was filled with the scent of polished wood and lavender, and a faint fire burned in the hearth. She stood when Poirot entered, her demeanour calm and collected, though her sharp eyes betrayed a hint of nervousness. "Monsieur Poirot," she greeted, her voice smooth and controlled. "How may I assist you today?" Poirot wasted no time in getting to the heart of the matter. "Madame Clare, I have come to ask you about the disturbances that have been reported in the house, the strange noises, the shadows, and the unexpected movements. You have been in the house for a long time, I believe. Could you offer some insight into these occurrences?" Mrs. Clare's face tightened imperceptibly, but she regained her composure quickly. "I'm afraid I do not know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot. There are always strange sounds in a house this size, settling floors, wind in the rafters, that sort of thing. But I can assure you there is nothing more to it." Poirot studied her closely, noting the slight tension in her jaw, the way her hands fidgeted ever so slightly as she spoke. "Ah, but, Madame Clare, I do not believe this is a case of settling floors. No, there is something else at play here, something hidden beneath the surface. You see, I have come across a small but significant clue. A piece of fabric, velvet, deep purple. Do you recognize it?" The colour drained from Mrs. Clare's face, and for a moment she seemed at a loss for words. Poirot could see the shock in her eyes, the sudden realization that her secret had been uncovered. She quickly regained her composure, but it was too late. Poirot had already seen the truth. "That fabric," she said, her voice tight, "does not belong to me, Monsieur Poirot. I do not know how it came to be there." Poirot smiled thinly. "I am not so easily fooled, Madame Clare. But I will give you a chance to explain yourself. If you have nothing to hide, then speak freely." Mrs. Clare hesitated, her mind clearly at war with her conscience. At last, with a deep breath, she began. Chapter 4. 7. The Confession of Mrs. Clare. Mrs. Clare sat before Hercule Poirot, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The fire crackled in the hearth, but the warmth seemed to have no effect on the chill that had descended over the room. Poirot, ever observant, noticed the slight tremor in her fingers, the rapid rise and fall of her chest, as if she were trying to steady her breath. There was something about the woman that piqued his interest. Her calm exterior, carefully crafted over the years, was beginning to crack. "Madame Clare," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm, "you are a woman of experience, a woman who has managed Beaumont House for many years. You have seen the comings and goings of its inhabitants, and you are keenly aware of the family's peculiarities. So tell me, why the velvet fabric? Why did it come to rest so conveniently in the kitchen hallway?" For a long moment, Mrs. Clare did not respond. Her eyes lowered to the floor, and Poirot could see the internal battle she was waging. She had something to hide. Of that, Poirot was certain. But what was it? The fabric was clearly a clue, and now, with Mrs. Clare's reaction, it seemed to be the key to unravelling the entire mystery. At last she spoke, her voice tight with emotion. "You are right, Monsieur Poirot. The velvet fabric is indeed mine, though I did not intend for it to be discovered. It is from an old gown I wore many years ago. I had forgotten about it until recently, when I stumbled upon the fabric while cleaning the attic. I knew it had to be discarded, so I threw it away without giving it a second thought. But it seems my efforts to keep it hidden were in vain. Poirot tilted his head, studying her carefully. You claim the fabric is from a gown, Madame Claire, yet it appears to be of a very particular type, expensive, delicate, and clearly worn with intention. A gown worn for more than mere daily use. Was this fabric from a gown worn on a special occasion? Mrs. Clare's eyes flickered, betraying her thoughts for just a moment. Then, with a deep sigh, she spoke again. Yes, Monsieur Poirot. It was a gown I wore on a night many years ago. It was the night my life changed forever. The words hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken history. Poirot leaned forward, his attention now fully fixed on the housekeeper. He knew there was much more to her story, but the question was whether she would finally reveal it. You see, Mrs. Clare continued, her voice faltering slightly, I was once a young woman, not so different from any other. I had dreams, ambitions, and I had a secret lover, someone who promised me a future beyond the confines of Beaumont House. It was a brief affair, but it was passionate, and I believed it would lead to something more. She paused, her eyes distant, lost in the past. Poirot said nothing, allowing her the space to continue. He could sense that she was on the cusp of something important, something that could shed light on the mystery surrounding the golden toothpick. But my lover disappeared that night, Mrs. Clare said quietly, her voice trembling. The night I wore the gown, I attended a small gathering at Beaumont House, and he promised he would join me there. He never did. He vanished without a trace, and I have not heard from him since. Poirot's mind began to race. He had suspected that the mystery of the golden toothpick and the strange occurrences in the house were linked to something far more personal than a mere theft. This was no ordinary affair. It was a story of lost love, betrayal, and hidden motives. Madame Claire, Poirot said, his voice gentle but probing, you claim your lover disappeared that night, yet you say it was also the night your life changed forever. How did it change precisely? Mrs. Clare's face tightened, and she took a long, deliberate breath. I knew the night he vanished that something had gone terribly wrong, but I could not prove it. The police could find no trace of him, and I was left alone, with nothing but my memories and the gown that held the story of that evening. Over the years, I tried to move on. I buried the past, and I took on the role of housekeeper here at Beaumont House. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And the golden toothpick, Madame Claire? What does it have to do with your lover, and why is it so important now? At this, Mrs. Clare visibly flinched. Her hand instinctively reached for the back of her neck, as though she were searching for a place to anchor herself. The toothpick was his, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. He gave it to me as a token, a sign of his love and of our promise to be together. I never understood its significance, but I kept it all these years, locked away in a drawer. It was the only piece of him I had left, but when I found it recently, I felt a strange sense of unease. It felt as though something was drawing me back into the past, back into the mystery of his disappearance. Poirot sat back in his chair, his mind racing. The golden toothpick was not just a trinket. It was a symbol, a reminder of a love that had vanished, of a man who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. But why was the toothpick now at the centre of the current mystery? And why was Mrs. Clare so agitated by its presence? "You believe the toothpick is connected to his disappearance, don't you?" Poirot asked softly. Mrs. Clare nodded, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. Chapter 9. The heart of the Mystery Poirot's fingers lingered on the cold metal of the chest's lock. The strange sensation he had felt a moment ago seemed to grow stronger, as if something or someone was waiting inside. He exchanged a quick glance with Inspector Lestrade, who stood at a cautious distance, his brow furrowed in uncertainty. "Poirot," Lestrade whispered, his voice tight with apprehension. "What do you think is inside?" Poirot did not respond immediately. His mind was already racing through the possibilities. The chest was no ordinary piece of furniture. It had been intentionally concealed, hidden behind the false bookshelf. Whatever it contained, it was clearly of immense importance, perhaps linked to the golden toothpick, the mysterious disappearance, or even the strange noises that had echoed through Beaumont House in recent days. With deliberate slowness, Poirot inserted the key he had found earlier into the lock. The metal clicked, and the chest opened with an almost audible sigh, revealing its contents. Inside, wrapped in layers of velvet cloth, was a small wooden box. The box itself was unremarkable, except for the faint traces of wear that suggested it had been handled many times over the years. Poirot carefully lifted the box from its resting place, his eyes scanning every inch for any hint of its significance. The velvet covering the box felt oddly warm, as if it had been recently disturbed. Lestrade, unable to suppress his curiosity any longer, stepped forward. "What is it? What's in the box?" Poirot paused, considering the question. "We shall soon know," he replied with his usual calm precision. "But I must be certain, Inspector. What we find here will change everything." He slowly opened the box. Inside, nestled in a bed of soft faded silk, lay a small object, a golden toothpick. Its surface was polished to a brilliant shine, but it was not the toothpick's gleaming appearance that struck Poirot. It was the engraving on its handle. Carved into the gold was a symbol, a serpent coiled around a dagger. The design was intricate, almost hypnotic, and it seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the engraving for any additional clues, but there was no mistaking its significance. "This," Poirot muttered under his breath, "is the key to the puzzle." Lestrade, still unable to fully grasp the depth of the mystery, leaned in closer. "The toothpick? That's the thing you've been searching for all along?" Poirot nodded, his gaze never leaving the object. "Yes, mon ami. The golden toothpick is not just a trinket. It is a symbol of something much darker. It is connected to the family's past, to the disappearance of Mrs. Clare's lover, and to the strange events that have unfolded here at Beaumont House." Lestrade's face twisted with confusion. But why? Why would anyone go to such lengths to hide it? Poirot closed the box gently, the toothpick now safely concealed within its velvet lining. He turned to face the inspector, his expression serious. There is more to this house than meets the eye, Inspector. I believe someone is using the house to protect something. A secret that has been buried for years. This toothpick is not merely an artifact. It is a key to unlocking the truth. Lestrade's scepticism lingered, but he could not deny the weight of Poirot's words. So, what now? What's the next step? Poirot thought for a moment before responding. We need to speak with Mrs. Clare again. There is something she is not telling us. Something she knows about this toothpick and its significance. But we must approach her carefully. She may be hiding more than we realize. The journey back to the main house was brief, but Poirot's thoughts were already occupied with the next course of action. The discovery of the golden toothpick had only deepened the mystery, revealing a connection between Mrs. Clare's past and the strange events that had plagued the house in recent weeks. But what was the true nature of that connection? And how did the toothpick fit into the puzzle? When they arrived at Mrs. Clare's private sitting room, she was seated near the fireplace, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She appeared composed, but Poirot noticed the subtle tension in her posture. She had been expecting them. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," Mrs. Clare said, her voice quiet but steady. "I see you've found it." Poirot did not immediately respond. Instead, he placed the wooden box on the table in front of her. She did not flinch, but her gaze flickered to the box before returning to his face. "You know what this is?" Poirot said, his voice firm but gentle. "The golden toothpick. It was not just a keepsake, was it? It is a symbol of something much darker." Mrs. Clare's eyes remained fixed on the box. She took a deep breath before finally speaking. "I knew you would find it, Poirot. I was hoping you wouldn't, but I suppose it was inevitable." "Mrs. Clare," Poirot continued, his tone insistent, "you must tell me what this toothpick represents. Why was it hidden for so long?" She looked up at him. Her eyes filled with a mixture of resignation and sorrow. "It was my husband's. He was involved in something far darker than I ever realized. The toothpick was a symbol of that involvement, and the serpent and dagger, well, those were the marks of the organization he was a part of." "An organization?" Lestrade asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "What kind of organization?" Mrs. Clare's eyes darted to the fireplace, as if the answer might lie within the flickering flames. "A secret society. My husband had been a member for years. I didn't know at first, but eventually I found out. He was embroiled in some dangerous business, and it cost him dearly. He disappeared years ago, and I never saw him again." Poirot leaned forward slightly, his sharp gaze never leaving Mrs. Clare. "And the toothpick, why did it matter so much?" Mrs. Clare hesitated before speaking, her voice trembling slightly. The toothpick was given to him as a token of trust. It was the mark of initiation, of loyalty. And I fear it was also a marker of something far worse, something that led to his downfall. Poirot's mind raced as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The toothpick was not just a symbol. It was a key to understanding the tragic events that had shaped Mrs. Clare's life. But there was still much to uncover, secrets buried beneath layers of deception and half-truths. "There is one more thing, Mrs. Clare," Poirot said, his voice now soft but compelling. "You must tell me the whole truth. There is more to your husband's disappearance, and I believe it is connected to the strange events at Beaumont House. Mrs. Clare's face paled as she looked down at her hands. "I've been afraid to speak of it, Poirot. But you're right. There is more, much more." Chapter 10. The final piece of the puzzle. The soft patter of rain against the mullioned windows of Beaumont House lent an eerie rhythm to the silence that settled after Mrs. Clare's confession. Hercule Poirot sat still, his fingertips steepled, gazing intently at the woman across from him. Inspector Lestrade stood near the hearth, arms crossed, the flicker of the fire casting long shadows over his tense expression. Mrs. Clare, once the imperious mistress of the house, now appeared diminished, her secrets laid bare like a ruined tapestry. She took a long breath before continuing. "My husband, Jonathan Clare, was not the man I thought I married," she said, voice hushed but clear. "At first, the meetings, the late nights, I thought them innocent. Business, perhaps. But as time passed, I discovered fragments, hints, letters he tried to burn, symbols scrawled in the margins of books. And that toothpick." Poirot gestured gently to the velvet box that still lay open on the table. The golden toothpick gleamed softly in the firelight, its serpent and dagger engraving a silent testament to secrets long kept. "It is not merely a trinket," Poirot said. "It is the insignia of l'Ordre du Couteau d'Or, an obscure but dangerous secret society dating back centuries. A criminal organization operating in shadows, under the guise of aristocratic tradition." Lestrade stepped forward. "They're still active? In England?" Poirot nodded solemnly. "Rarely, and always discreetly. But Mr. Clare, it seems, was a member who tried to withdraw. That is where things went. Poorly." Mrs. Clare's eyes glistened with tears that refused to fall. "He told me he was leaving them, that he would burn the past, bury the gold, start anew. We were going to disappear together. But then, one night, he vanished. I assumed the worst, that they had found him out and silenced him." Poirot leaned forward. "But something always troubled you. The lack of a body, the lack of proof." "Yes," she whispered. "No note, no blood, no certainty. Just silence. Until 2 nights ago, when I heard that sound again. The knock on the old kitchen wall. The same knock he used when we were young, before we married. I thought I was mad." "You were not," Poirot said. "Your husband is alive." The room froze. Lestrade stepped forward. "What do you mean? Are you sure?" Poirot's voice was crisp. "Oui, Inspector. Mr. Clare faked his own death. He realized that leaving the order was not enough. He had to become someone else. And he succeeded. He has been living not 30 miles from here, under the name Joseph Miller, Richier, recluse said to be an antiquarian scholar. But when the golden toothpick resurfaced, moved from a hidden compartment in his study to Beaumont House, he feared discovery. He returned, and he's been hiding in the West Wing, using the forgotten servant tunnels." Mrs. Clare clutched, her chest speechless. "It was he," Poirot continued, "who left the message in your ledger. Not safe. Burn the past. He was warning you. The Order knows he's alive." "But how did he get in?" Lestrade asked. "The place has been sealed for years." Poirot gestured to the diagram of the estate he had drawn earlier. Through the underground passage, beneath the old stables. The same tunnel smugglers once used. Jonathan sealed part of it years ago, but left an entrance for himself, should he ever return. Poirot rose and moved toward the window, staring out at the storm-tossed trees. The final mystery was not one of symbols, but of love and fear, a man desperate to atone, a woman clinging to memory, and a house filled with whispers. Just then, there came a knock at the study door. It opened to reveal a tall, bearded man, rain-soaked and gaunt. His eyes, though older, were unmistakable. Mrs. Clare gasped, standing as though pulled by an invisible thread. "Jonathan!" she breathed. He stepped into the room, eyes on her alone. I couldn't stay away. When I heard Poirot was involved, I knew it was only a matter of time. Lestrade moved to arrest him, but Poirot lifted a hand. "No need, Inspector. His crimes belong to a different world, one he abandoned. You seek justice, but this is closure." Mrs. Clare reached for her husband, and for a moment time folded in on itself. Their grief, their silence, their endurance giving way to fragile reunion. Poirot turned to Lestrade. "The golden toothpick is now evidence, but the true resolution is here, in the hearts, not the courts." Lestrade sighed. "You're a sentimental one, Poirot." Poirot straightened his tie with a satisfied nod. "No, I am precise, but even precision must make room for humanity." 2 days later, the news of the case remained quietly buried. Lestrade ensured it. The Clares left for Switzerland under assumed names, far from the reach of their past. Beaumont House would be. Sold Poirot, back in London, sat beside his fire, polishing a silver tie-pin. Hastings entered, coat damp from the rain. "And so the toothpick?" Poirot smiled. "Returned to Scotland Yard. The society is toothless now. Without symbols, they crumble." "And you, mon ami?" Hastings asked. Poirot glanced at the fire, then at the window, where the rain had begun to lift. "I have had many cases, Hastings, but few with such delicate threads. A riddle wrapped in gold and sorrow." Hastings chuckled. "You never cease to surprise me, Poirot." Poirot stood adjusting his cuffs. "Then I am doing my job. Come, we dine at Simpson's. And tonight, perhaps, we speak not of crime, but of chess." And with that, the great detective turned the page on another mystery, his little grey cells at peace once more.